Stunning new reporting from the New York Times recounts the administration's freakout over the Epstein files and its efforts to contain the fallout. According to the Times, on July 17th, 2025, top administration officials met in the White House Situation Room without the president to address the backlash over the DOJ's handling of the Epstein investigation and to attempt to regain control. That is the stuff that I think is the fuel for conspiracies around a broader cover-up of this Epstein scandal.
I mean, I just found this article so entertaining, which is not what you were supposed to get from it.
But it's revelatory.
It's revelatory of the degree to which, at least at the outset of this administration, they were so plugged into the online right, which is where this stuff lives. It is not really bleeding out into the real world, and I have proof. It's not hard to find polling, even last year, where Republicans, Democrats, majorities say we don't approve of how this administration is handling the Epstein files. But is it a salient issue? Fox News Channel in July surveyed the people who said we disapprove of this president, 54%. Litany of reasons they offered, you can imagine. 1% said the Epstein files, and that was exclusively Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents. It was just it was a MAGA thing, but it was an online MAGA thing. Yeah. It wasn't in the real world.
But in that meeting, the vice president thought it was a real thing and thought that it was effectively, I think the quote was, this is going to, Dan Bongino said this. He said, this is going to be the president's Iran-Contra. Part of the reason Dan Bongino would say something like this is because they literally brought the conspiracy theorists into the White House.
As Noah said, he is an extremely online person, as is the president of the United States. It makes a lot of sense that he'd have interest in this. But all of this gives me very much so like Russiagate vibes. The reality is that the president wasn't a Russian asset. He was never the Manchurian president. But he certainly seemed to act like it. He was obsessed with the story in the same way that his critics were obsessed with kind of promulgating these conspiracy. He fed it and gave it energy. And I think the behavior of the administration with respect to the Epstein scandal, which I think quite honestly is driven primarily by speculation, by this belief that there must be some deeper story here, when in fact that this is something that has occurred across multiple administrations, across multiple political parties. The reality is that if there was any sort of criminal conduct in these files related to the president of the United States, the current one, we would have known about it already.
Okay.
Everything leaks.
So
it hasn't happened.
So wait, either. I mean, part of what you get from the story is that they were desperate to find out if there was stuff about Trump.
Yes, stuff that was perhaps embarrassing.
So they were like, we've got to figure out if he's implicated here, and they dug through it.
Right. With all due respect, the Russiagate comparison, I think, doesn't hold up because Robert Mueller in the Mueller report said that there was some problems here going on. Maybe the term collusion isn't really a legal one, but there were some issues there, and he was hoping that the Congress would take it up through, or it would go through a legal process once Trump got out of office. So that was that. And unfortunately, because of the Attorney General and all kinds of different things, they decided not to do that. But we can't just absolve him from whatever was going on with the Russians. So there's that. Now, as far as Epstein is concerned, the guy's name is in the Epstein files thousands of times. He was best friends with him for years. He was on his plane with him. They were involved in all kinds of things.
But the evidence of criminal conduct.
There are 2.5 million. There are 2.5 million files that still have not been released. And if Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and all the people in the Situation Room, which is where you usually go when you need things to be really, really, really secure, why are they going to the Situation Room?
Vibes here.
No, because they're concerned about what did the president know? How much did he know and why? Is he legally culpable? We don't know. But he all has his minions in the Department of Justice who are covering this for him.
I have to agree with you.
This is not how you behave when you're innocent.
It's a very long article, which I also found somewhat entertaining just for like the gossip value of it, right? Like Bongino calling Pam Bondi Blondie, berating her in front of everybody and telling her, you fucked this up from the beginning. I mean, that was kind of glorious. But I also got out of it that, and how much they wanted her gone, right? I also got out of it just how different J.D. Vance's take is within the administration from some of the people that are surrounding Trump, like Susie Wiles. He is obviously plugged in to the MAGA sphere and the manosphere in a way that some of the political folks that are around Trump
That's
are
really
not.
not surprising
the
for a
way-
vice
Honestly,
president.
if they had listened to him at the beginning and just released the files instead of doing all the other shenanigans, I actually think this
That's actually a
might, this
great
might
point.
have ended up
almost like-
differently.
it's almost
They didn't listen
It's
to him,
almost
and
like
that's
he's,
probably
it's
why
almost
they
like
ended
he's
up
running for president in
Yeah.
2028.
Enough time has passed that we now know that if there had been any evidence, if there had been any of these details,
J.D.
it
Vance
would
wouldn't have made that
come
recommendation.
forward.
Not
but
true.
Here's what I'm interested in. What if, when Graham Plattner came to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Senate Minority Leader and all these other people, someone there was taking detailed notes and they decided to write a book? It's not so much what insider conversations talk about, it's about what ends up happening. It can sound salacious.
What are you
It
talking
can
about?
sound really, really provocative,
Horace,
but
what
it
are you
has
talking
no
about?
actual merit in
The
the end.
Department of Justice has not moved whatsoever on going after any of the people who are in these files. They've covered it up. They have thousands of pages of redactions.
don't agree with
And you
that.
have,
People
you
are
have
involved
the,
in this cover-up.
wait a
Is that
minute,
a
you have the
cover-up, or is there
survivors.
no
You have
prosecutable
the-
crime
no,
here?
This
Here's
is
one
not
thing
how
I
you
will
behave
agree.
when they're innocent.
We have to go, and I think just to Tara's point, if there's one thing that you take away from all of the reporting in this story, it's at the highest levels of DOJ, their top priority as it relates to the Epstein files was protecting the president.
Right, not-
Pam Bondi,
That's right.
Deputy Attorney General,
That does not
Todd
shock
Blanche,
me.
and that is not their
That's
job.
not their job. Their job was
is
to
not
protect the survivors.
It's
and
not to
how about
protect the
that?
president. Their job is to
What
protect
happened in
the
Bill Gates?
survivors,
What
the
happened in Bill
victims. Okay,
Gates'
so,
testimony today,
yeah,
saying
we
that
gotta go.
that Epstein was trying to extort him through knowing about his infidelity, to me is more relevant because it might explain how the hell Epstein got all that money. Blackmail.
Not one
Alright,
of
we
these
got a lot
people
more to
was a
learn on
line
this.
prosecutor.
Do you think that Blanche is going to actually face a tough confirmation process?
No, I do not. I think the Republicans at the end of the day are going to rally around him and confirm him as Attorney General. I think that's wrong for the country because he was Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Now, look, we've had attorneys general of all different kinds, right? Bobby Kennedy was the president's brother. There have been an attorney general went to prison. But what Todd Blanche has demonstrated already, he has the qualifications. No question. He was a top lawyer, top prosecutor in New York. He doesn't have the character. Okay. Pam Bondi essentially made a confession by saying that it was Epstein. It was Blanche who handled the Epstein files. She was really a show horse. He was the workhorse. So the work of this Justice Department over the first year and a half was really Todd Blanche's. And time again, when Donald Trump's personal interests are at stake, and they conflict with the nation's interest, like this slush fund, like the tax settlement with the Trump family and companies, he goes with his client, Donald Trump.
I work in the community where Todd was a U.S. attorney
Right.
in the Southern District. I didn't know him personally then. I did have an encounter with him when he was representing the president in the courthouse. But he does enjoy amongst his colleagues an excellent reputation for his integrity, his knowledge of the law. I don't know how Todd Blanche covered up for Donald Trump regarding the Epstein files. There may be ways that the Epstein files came out that people aren't happy with,
Yeah.
tell you
but
how-
I don't think that's one of them.
I can tell you how he covered up for him. Todd Blanche went down to Florida and met with Ghislaine Maxwell.
My client,
Met
Ghislaine
with-
Maxwell, my
met with
client.
her
Go ahead.
in prison,
Go ahead.
and then mysteriously she ends up in a lower
Well,
security
it wasn't
prison
mysterious.
Well,
We
in,
don't
in
know about
Texas.
it.
But that
Well,
does
I
not.
mean, but
that's
you
the
said at the
process.
time, Arthur, that you thought that was basically a quid pro quo.
Let me just be very clear. I don't know that for a fact. I want to make that blatantly clear. I've spoken to Ghislaine not that long ago. First of all, people get moved within the system all the
come
time.
on,
They-
come on.
They just moved Keith Raniere, who's
okay.
doing 120 years
But
to a less
you
restrictive
basically
facility.
said, I mean, let's you know,
I'm using
I
common
believe you.
sense,
I believe you when you say maybe you don't know firsthand
don't.
exactly what transpired in that conversation, but you basically said that no one would avail their client in a situation like that unless they were getting something out of it,
Yeah.
and that the move from
That's
a
common sense.
you know a high security prison to a low security prison would be. I'll
Of
use your
course.
words.
I mean,
A common
yes,
sense
but
outcome.
Let me
of a
just make
quid
it
pro
very
quo.
clear. I did not
Yeah.
represent Ghislaine on the conversations with Todd. We did her appeal. But yes, I'm not going to bring any client in to see any prosecutor unless I know there's some benefit
Benefit,
for my
yeah.
client. I mean,
So
it's
I mean,
common
is
sense.
that ethical?
Of course it's the way the system
I
works.
mean,
no,
well,
Tell me, what do you mean it's not
but
ethical? It's the way it works every day.
Is that ethical in the context of the crimes that she
Exactly.
is
Yes.
convicted
And that's
of.
what I was going to say is
That's the real
Exactly.
question.
Moving
that
from one
faces us.
prison for 20 years to another prison for
To
20
a
years.
low
Yes.
security
Yes.
prison that
Yes.
she
That-
is
yes,
actually
it's ethical.
not supposed
It's
to be
ethical.
in.
Well,
It's
let me
by
just say
statute.
this.
Yeah.
Todd Blanche probably does know the law really well, but his application of the law is, I think, what is in question right now. And we all know there are different types of lawyers out here, just like there are different types of salespeople out there. Some sell snake oil, and some sell actually real goods that are going to be help.
Like coconut oil.
Coconut oil. Right?
Coconut.
We were talking
All
about.
right. Yeah, coconut oil.
Very funny, aren't there? But I think a couple of things. One, Pam Bondi making this omission or this basically confession that Todd Blanche was over the Epstein files. One, clearly a woman scorned. She's pissed, right? And so she's like, I'm let everybody know where the body's buried. And actually, I believe that because if you've ever worked with the DOJ in an administration, you do know the AG and the DAG actually do have separate portfolios. And while they do confer, a lot of times they move policy separately. So the strong likelihood that the DAG probably actually, meaning the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, actually was leading on the Epstein files and covered it up, which makes, though, the point about his character as the Attorney General even more questionable. And this is now transcended party. You have people who are in MAGA, you have people who are Democrats, you have independents who are really concerned at the handling, not just at the Trump administration, but many of his administrations handling of the Epstein files. But because Trump ran on this as being so transparent, and there is now a law that is passed about transparency and they still aren't being completely transparent, it raises questions. On top of Todd Blanche in every act while he was acting, doing as many things possible to accommodate Donald Trump's promises of retribution, especially with the backdrop of Pam Bondi getting fired because Donald Trump didn't think she did it well enough. So when that fact pattern happens,
is he willing to tell President Trump no, or does he just think that President Trump is still his client like he was in the private sector?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on here. One, I think Pam Bondi has absolutely laid the groundwork for Todd Blanche to have a difficult confirmation. And I think she used her time in that closed door session where she was sworn under oath in front of Congress as the former Attorney General and as Todd Blanche's former boss to say he ran the whole process and he was in charge of the whole release and the Dow's at 50,000, right? And so she's now laid the groundwork for that to be a confirmation where Democrats can essentially have a layup and say, there's no way I could vote for this guy. I can't. This is about women. This is about protecting. Because like you said, other people have noticed this has been a politically toxic issue for the president. I'm sure there's a lot we're going to disagree on, but on the topic of the slush fund and answering to the president, I think we should agree on the facts. And what the facts are is that the creation of this fund, it's not a slush fund, it's an anti-weaponization fund. Why do we have the fund?
Okay.
Why do we have the fund?
Because Donald Trump wants it.
Because Charles Littlejohn.
reward the rioters,
Let's
the people who
go
attacked our
through some
elections.
yes or no questions.
That's-
IRS contractor Charles Littlejohn pled guilty to leaking President Trump's tax returns. Yes or no?
Can I-
Yes.
Yes.
Before we go
He
there,
also pled
400,000
guilty.
other Americans.
He also pled guilty.
400,000
So
other
we
Americans.
know. Then we also have
but
why does Trump get $1
400,000
billion
cases of
for that?
anti-weaponization
What does that have
against
to do?
Americans,
What does that have
which
to
is
do
enough.
with a $1.8 billion fund that Trump explicitly said this week was to compensate January 6th rioters who he pardoned?
I think because there are a number of people who have felt the full weight of the weaponization
He
of the
said
government.
he said this week
That's
when he was
fine.
when he was
And-
asked
and
about
we
the
look-
fund, he said, "I'm proud I pardoned these people and they deserve money from the government."
Yeah,
That's
because
what
we
he
had
wants the fund
grandmas
to
who
be
were in
about.
jail for 2 years. We had people who did not commit violent crimes while we watched people
Well,
do
there
BLM
are many
riots
people who
Oh,
did
in Minnesota and
attack
watched
violent
Democrats put up
crimes.
links saying donate to
There
religions
are
in
many
jail.
people who did commit violent crimes, and the president himself has said that he wants them to be compensated.
this is a joke.
I'm not
And
just talking about-
I'm really embarrassed for you that you have to defend this because even Republican senators on the Hill are saying that this is ridiculous. And Donald Trump isn't doing himself any favors by pushing
Did
this.
the Justice
I-
Department have to
I-
apologize to Donald Trump? Yes
You
or
know
no?
what? I let you speak
No.
the whole
Yes or
time.
no?
I let you
No.
speak. I didn't
Yes.
interrupt you. Okay? So thank you. Donald Trump is even in trouble now because we've got Tom Tillis, you've got Cassidy, you've got Cornyn, all these people who are raising questions about Trump's decision making here. And I think the big problem is there used to be this principle in the Justice Department called avoiding the appearance of impropriety. I don't think they care about avoiding the appearance of impropriety.
But they pulled it
Let
back.
me speak.
I
let me
agree
just
with you.
speak.
I'm
No,
agreeing
let
with
me
you.
just speak. They don't care. Every step they make is creating more distrust among the American people about the ability of the justice system to operate fairly and impartially. And that's not good. Not just bad for democracy. It's not just bad for Democrats. It's bad for the entire country.
So what
That's not
about-
a good state for us to be in.
What about
But,
when
with that, but I agree with what you're saying. And I think ultimately Todd Blanche agreed with what you're saying. And ultimately that's why he said it's dead. The
He
fund
did
is
not
dead.
say that,
did
though.
not
He did not
say
say
that.
that.
They're
And
dissolving the fund. It's not
no,
going
he didn't.
forward.
The fund said that I read that document. It says it can only be changed by written agreement of the parties. That means Donald Trump and Todd Blanche have to sign an agreement to dissolve it. He did not do that. He
Okay,
refused to put it in writing.
I believe I saw the cover of the New York Times
I
said
don't care.
Todd
Who
Blanche.
cares?
Said, well, I don't know.
I saw the testimony.
I give the New York Times
But
some
here's the
credit
thing.
that they're going to
Here's the
fact
thing.
check before they
After
put it
but-
out.
Todd Blanche
Arthur-
was in testifying and saying, we're not going to do it, we're not going to do it. Literally hours, in the same 24 hours, Donald Trump from the Resolute desk says, I don't know if it's dead. I'm not sure if it's dead. So the inconsistency. I also think, this slush fund, if it actually goes through, Donald Trump won't be president forever, and there will be a lot of people that Todd Blanche actually goes after probably that actually might benefit from this slush fund
But
because
what about
All right.
the 400,000
Let-
Americans,
let
as you
me-
said, who had their tax returns leaked? Would you
Let
like any
me-
of your
let me-
tax returns
let me
leaked?
ask
Those
Arthur one
Americans
last
deserve
question.
justice, and they
Pam,
will
That's not
under
who he's
this
talking
fund.
about. He's talking about
That's
people
absolutely
attacked the
who he's
2020
talking about, and
election.
that's who the fund was
That's who
created
he's
for.
talking about.
No,
The
it
people that
wasn't.
attacked
it wasn't.
It wasn't. That's
It was
just-
created as a result of a settlement with
Hold on.
Donald Trump
It
and
was
the
not a
IRS.
settlement. That's
All
the
right.
reason why he did it.
We're
He
not.
dropped his
Hold on a
case.
second. Hold on a second, everyone. We're not. We don't have to guess about this.
We know.
Yeah, right.
We know why the fund was created because the president told us, and it was to compensate January 6th riders. Arthur, one last question for you. Pam Bondi claims that she had no idea that Todd Blanche went down to Florida to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you think that there's any chance that that's true?
That's a huge stretch. I mean, that's really
She
just.
said she read it in the newspaper, like the rest of us.
Look, I'm not going to challenge the former attorney general's credibility, but that seems like a bridge too far, so to speak. I mean, first of all, they usually kind of know where they are, like physically.
Yes.
They know where the attorney general knows where the DAG is, and the DAG knows where the AG is, almost 24/7, 365. So that doesn't have the ring of truth to it. But Terry, it is not unethical for just because I do this, brother, for me to bring in a guy who's doing time and say, look, he may have some information on you on a case, but he's got 20 years in. He's only going to do it if you give him some sort of benefit. Well, what do you have in mind, Mr. Aidala? Like, look, where he is a hellhole. Just put him over here. I'm not asking you to take any time off his sentence. Just move him. That's not. And then so a lot of times my client gives them very
She's one
valuable
of the
evidence.
worst child abusers in
So was
American
Jeffrey
history.
Epstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's dead.